mindful that you can be heard on the internet. So, how y'all doing tonight? Man, you brought a crowd, sis. That's right. How many of y'all it's your first time here?
Wow.
Oh, wow. Hello, welcome to the Sankofa family. Okay, let's get this started. You can press.
Oh, yeah, you could.
Oh, you started.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, good. I'm Christina Joy. I'm the events coordinator here at Sankofa Video Books and Cafe. We have been open since 1997. We were founded by Haile and Shirikiana Garima. They're two. Yes, give it up for Haile and Shirikiana.
I was in one of his classes. I loved him. Script writing. Loved him. Amazing. One of my favorite professors.
Howard professor, yes. Yes, the real HU, even though we didn't show that this weekend at the Hampton game, but it's all right. It's all right. We show up and show out where we need to, right? Because I saw the rankings and I heard we was number 2 again. So, or what? I'm pretty. Yeah, we was number 2 on the HBCU list this year. Howard University. Shout out to my alma mater. And so we were founded by Haile and Shirikiana in 1997. Sankofa the movie came out in 1993. If you haven't watched Sankofa the movie, it's on Netflix. So, add it to your watch list tonight, okay? Tonight, we are so excited to introduce and debut Carol Mitchell's first book, What Start a Bad Morning? Give it up. For all y'all online, I wish y'all could see the love that's really in this room. And Carol, you have filled this place with so many new faces. We really appreciate it. Thank you, Chantal James. She is here tonight hosting, leading us in conversation with Carol. So I'm going to read their bios and then I'm going to get on stage, y'all. So Carol Mitchell. Carol Mitchell is originally from the Caribbean. Carol Mitchell now teaches literature and creative writing in Virginia, where she is a fellow of the Virginia Center for Creative Arts. She regularly writes on Caribbean literature for Gecko Publishing and has published short stories in various Caribbean journals, 4 of which have been longlisted for the Commonwealth Short Story Prize. In 2018, Mitchell was a recipient of the MFA Fellowship from Alan Chase International Writers Center. What Start a Bad Morning is her debut adult novel. Give it up. Talk about a debut. My goodness. Hey, Chantal James. Let me find you that right quick. Chantal James lives in Washington, D.C. and has been published across genres as a poet, fiction writer, essayist, and book reviewer in such venues as Catapult, Taste, Harvard's Transition, The Bitter Southerner, and more. James's honors include a Fulbright Fellowship in Creative Writing to Morocco and a finalist position for the Alex Albright Creative Nonfiction Prize for the North Carolina Literary Review in 2019. Give it up for Chantal. Join us now for a wonderful discussion. Chantal, take it away.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you for having us. Thank you, Christina. Thank you, Sankofa. Thank you to all of you guys who have gathered here, ladies and gentlemen, and non-binary individuals. And we're so happy to be here. And I'm greatly honored to be in conversation with Ms. Carol Mitchell on her first novel, and What Start Bad a Morning. And so I'm going to get right into our questions in the interest of time. And hopefully we can have a fruitful conversation. And maybe if there's some time left over, we can get into a reading. So, Carol, my first question for you, the very first thing that struck me in this experience of reading this novel was the way you were moving through time. So I wanted to talk to you about that choice. Just if you might be interested in sharing with us what motivated you to move this story through time in the way that you did, choosing to be in particular times and particular places, not necessarily in a linear order, because you mentioned you're reading my work, and so you know that I play with not doing things in a linear way too. So whenever I see that, that kind of catches my eye. So I was hoping if you could get into sort of the logic of the story's order through space and time, and some of your decision making in using the choice not to go straight from point A to point B.
Okay, can you hear me? Yes. All right. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you so much to Sankofa for having me, and for my family. Oh my gosh, you guys have showed up. It's amazing. I'm just like barely holding back tears, I have to say, for just all the love that's in this room. I'm not gonna like start saying anything else beside that, but just know that I truly appreciate you coming out here this evening, and I don't know. I am uncharacteristically lost for words. So, with respect to the issue of the time, so in the book, the main character Amaya, she is experiencing this situation where she's buried a memory of something pretty traumatic that happened to her when she was 17, and I was thinking as I wrote it a lot about memory and the fact that memory is kind of fiction. What we think we remember is often not just barely reality. And if you have a situation where two people have experienced the same thing and they will talk about it and they'll remember different details. And also, one of the characters, Amaya's aunt, is suffering from dementia, so she's also having issues with her memory. So the way that the book moves through time is kind of mirrors that idea of memory and of the loss of memory and of the fragmentation and how that impacts your life in that way. Also, I just lost my train of. I was gonna say something else. I lost my train of thought. So you can go ahead.
Sure. Well, maybe I can help you pick it back up again, because you actually kind of hit on my very next question. Because obviously this is a novel that's very concerned with memory, and there's so much of that at work here. There's so many different riffs on memory, from having a character who suffers from dementia to having a character with repressed memories. So my next question was actually, like, you can see it on this page, even though you can't read my handwriting. What are you saying about memory and how it works in this book? And then beyond that, I'm just so curious, as this woman as a character who's having an immigrant experience in the United States, I'm just so floored by all of the implications in this novel of what it can mean for Amaya to have such an inescapable connection to places that she can actually barely recall. It's like, actually, this is so deep in her fiber, yet it's not deep in her memory. So I was hoping you could go into that, if that would be possible.
Yeah, sure. So Amaya is from Jamaica, and she leaves Jamaica when she's in 18, and she leaves there around the late 70s, when there's a lot of political turmoil and violence. It's a really difficult time in Jamaica, and she goes to Trinidad. Some of you may have gone to UWI. I don't know if have some experience with UWI, but she goes to Trinidad to university there, and she leaves and then migrates to the US. So she's trying, as she leaves each place, to leave something behind her, and to shed and to become a new person and to become somebody else that hasn't had this traumatic experience. But as you say, as Caribbean, those of you who are from the Caribbean or from anywhere, thank you. who from the Caribbean or from anywhere that is not where you are currently, even if it's a different state or a different town, you kind of understand that they it's home stays with you. You know, no matter what you do, you are from somewhere. It stays with you. It's a part of your fiber, and it's difficult. So, like Amaya is trying to leave this behind, but certain smells, certain things that she cooks, certain experiences that she wants her son to have, and values and that are important to her just kind of stay with her throughout, despite her trying to leave the memories behind.
Wonderful. Thank you. I really love the way you address that as well. Um, Now I wanted to talk about your title. Because your title comes from a Jamaican proverb. And I'm gonna butcher this patois.
So am I.
But the proverb is what start bad a morning can't end good a evening.
Not bad, not bad at all.
Okay, well, I'm sorry to everybody for the way I butchered that, but that is just such a compelling proverb, and it is just I can see how that's at work and at play in your novel. But in particular, I wanted to ask you, is Amaya's journey through her past to her foundations reflected in this proverb that is talking about what starts in the morning and how it ends up in the evening? And can you say more about how the title connects with this work and how you see the title, interwoven throughout what's happening and thematically reflected in the book?
Yeah, sure. That's a great question. It's a question I get quite a bit. Some of you may be aware that the journey towards that title was not a straight line. I spent a lot of time. That's actually one of the first titles that I wanted for the book, but I was worried about how it would be received, how it would be heard, how difficult it would be for people to understand. And so we went through this process with my publisher, and they would say, "Oh, we'll call it this," and I'd agree. And then I would call them back and say, "No, that's still not working for me." And then we came back to this one, which "What Start Bad in Morning." So the proverb for me, it means different things to different people. But my mom used to say it to me when I was coming up, and she would say it about various things. The one I remember most is about young men. And it's like, okay, if he's doing that already, then it's not gonna. It's only going downhill from there. So what starts bad in the morning, it's not going to end good in the evening time, right? And for Amaya, I think what I was thinking about with respect to that is that she can't move forward and really become the full and complete human being that she is capable of being unless she addresses these things that have happened to her in her morning, in the morning of her life. And so I think that for many of us, that's something that is holding us back in life. There's something that has happened that, and I'm not talking here about forgiveness or anything like that. I'm talking about coming to terms with things in our own hearts and in our own experiences, and what impact past experiences that you haven't dealt with, that you haven't addressed, can have on you going forward. And so the title for Amaya, basically, that's what it means. She's a mother, she's successful in her job, she's successful at raising her son, she's successfully managing her aunt, and she has all these balls and she's keeping them up in the air. But when she stops to think about who she really is, when she stops to think about doing something for herself, she doesn't know what that is, because she's just kind of living. And until she goes back and deals with that, she's not going to be able to have anything to be complete in a way.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing that. And it's really a beautiful title.
Thank you.
So my next question, I wanted to talk about how your book kind of explores bonds, both of chosen kinship and blood kinship, because I feel like both of those are very important in this novel. So she has sister friends like Jamila that she connects with when she immigrates to the United States. But she also goes on and she and her husband have a tight circle with some other people. And so she has these chosen bonds that are very strong. But then she also goes on a journey over the course of this novel to understand her blood and her blood sisters and who they were and her parents and who they were. And so I'm wondering if you can speak to why these kinds of bonds, or why this question of the bonds that we choose and the bonds that are forged in blood are so central to this work.
Yeah, that's a great question. Every now and then I get a question that I haven't really thought about myself, and that's definitely one of them because I'm an only child. I have many sisters and one brother, who that they're my chosen sisters and brothers. A couple of them are here, and I really understand and treasure that bond of that chosen bond, and how important that can be, because the reality is that your siblings or your blood family, you don't necessarily always like them, but you love them. But sometimes it can be complicated, right? I'm seeing a lot of nods. Okay, it can be really complicated. So the idea that still, despite these close friendships that she has developed in her current life, she still has this need to go, and this draw and this pull from her chosen, from her blood family, from her bloodline, that she feels this draw, this need to follow and get to find out more about them. So I think that it just it kind of it sends home to me the importance of the love. Okay, third time's a charm. Yeah, so it just I think it underscores the importance of that bond of blood. I mean, there's a reason that despite the fact that you may not be you may not like, or you may not, the person who your blood connected to may not be your favorite people in the world, but when it comes down to it, they're probably who you're going to defend and to stand up for and to go after and to help and to support, no matter what happens. And that's kind of the experience that Amaya grows to have. She's created this new set of people who are important and really just wonderful in her life, but she still has something missing because she does not know who her blood relatives are.
Exactly. Well, thank you. I have a few more questions.
Sure.
I hope I have enough to last us, but I have a few more.
Sure.
So my next question, I just thought this would be good for everybody gathered, because so many times people want to know about the journey of how a book came to be. And so many times people are curious about what was your publication journey like. And you've written books for children, but this is your first book for adults. And there's almost always a story behind a debut. So, I mean, and so I was wondering if you might share a little bit about the journey that brought this book into the world, and from as far as your first conception to it, to your journey through publication, and to where you are now with it.
Yeah, sure. That's a great question. Thanks. So this book was conceived, I can go way back. All right, let's go way, way back. So in 2007, I wrote my first children's book, which is a book called Adventure at Brimstone Hill. And I wrote that because I was living in St. Kitts with my children, and I really wanted them to have a certain sort of book that was reflective of the Caribbean, I wasn't finding what I wanted. And so like, this is a story of so many children's authors, right? You don't see what you want your kids to read, and so you decide to write it. So that was my journey starting in terms of writing. I had a mentor, he's passed away now, and he said to me one time, he's like, you're doing a great job, you're writing well, but there's things you need to learn. And then, so being the academic that I am and living in Fairfax, very close to George Mason University, I was like, all right, I'm gonna go get an MFA. So I started doing my MFA. And in a class when I was there, I was given a prompt, and the prompt was to write a story based on a news article. And somehow I came up with the story of this young man who kills his parents. Does not happen in the book. He kills his parents, and then he goes and he turns himself into the police. And I never really finished that story, but I got very interested in that character. And in that character, that's Amaya's son, Taiwo. As I started to write about him more, his mom came into the picture. And then he and his mom were sitting in a garden, and he was making some tea for her, which was going to kill her. That also does not happen in the book. But this is where my mind goes. It always goes to tragedy. But yeah, so he's making this tea. And so this whole idea of her and him in this garden was just very central in my mind, and always very visual, because I'm a very visual writer. I tend to see see the story, and then I write it. So so Taiwo and Amaya sitting in the garden, and the other thing that happened around that time. So I developed the story over in bits and pieces in various classes. And the other thing that happened along that time is, for some reason, I came across this image of Bob Marley standing with Siaga and Manley holding hands. This is after he had been shot, so it was really kind of a dangerous thing for them, and they looked very uncomfortable on the stage. And they're in political strife. They're not getting along in public, at least. And so this was like a pretty big moment for them, where they could have called a truce or taken the people in a different direction. They chose not to, but that image was just really stuck with me. And the more I read about this, that time in Jamaica, I interviewed people, including my cousin's parents who now passed. I interviewed a number of people who lived in that time, and so I got really interested. So that's a little bit of a spoiler, because the ending of the story, Amaya's, the tragedy she experienced, is very closely connected to that historical event in the book. So at any rate, so I wrote all of this, and submitted for my MFA thesis, was approved, everything. And then a year later, I picked it up again, did some more work on it, rewrote the ending, because it ends very differently from that. They say to you when you finish your thesis, they're like, oh, don't worry about it if anybody reads it, because it's not going to look like that in the final version. They're very, very right. I did so much work on it. And then I went to Virginia Center for the Creative Arts, and I finished the book there. And while I was there, I did a reading with another author. And in my mind, even though I finished the book there and I went there, it was sort of a thing for me that I needed to do and I needed to complete. And I felt that I would finish this, maybe I'd print it out, put it on my bed. When I die in another 100 years, they would find it, and somebody would be like, oh, look at this thing Carol did. We didn't even know she did that. So this was my plan for the book. All right. It was called Amaya's Gardens at the time, and this was my plan for the book. And then I read at VCCA with another author, and she really liked my book, and she talked to her agent about it, and her agent took me on, and then he sold the book. And again, I was thinking, he's like, oh yeah, I can sell this book really quick. That's no problem. I'm like, yeah, right, okay. Because the thing with the story is that one of the problems with it is that it sort of bridges literary fiction and commercial fiction a little bit. So, you find some publishers would say to you, that, oh, it's too literary for our, we're looking for things more commercial. And then the ones who do more literary fiction is like, yeah, but it's so heavily plotted. Like there's so much action, there's so much happening, there's so much of it is about these events that it's not, we can't put it as literary fiction. So I was like, all right, good luck, on to the next thing. But in like 2 months, he sold it. And so I went with Central Avenue Publishing, which is a Canadian publisher, and they have been amazing. They have really, I mean, look at the book. It's gorgeous. Then the people kept saying to me, like, this happened, I would say maybe a year and a half or 2 years ago, and my parents are like, yeah, but why is it not coming out until September 2023? Like, TikTok, like, what's going on here? But it's a long journey. There's a whole process of even though I felt it was finished, it was not finished. There were scenes in there that needed to be removed because there were scenes that I loved, but that really weren't moving the plot along. And my plan is hopefully to have some of those out somewhere because I still love them. So there's that whole process, and then there's a process of getting reviews. So you send the book out, and we get advanced reviews. And I had some really wonderful authors that I admire so much, say some such kind things about my book that the first time I sent it to Elizabeth Nunez. I don't know if any of y'all know this, and she doesn't know me. I just like, all right, I'm gonna send her an email and see what happens. And she said, sure, she would read it. And when she came back and she's like, yes, I really love it, and this is what I had to say about it. And I sent it to Clavis Natera, who's a she has this amazing book, Neruda in the Park, and she texted me. I also had only met her very briefly, and she texted me and she's like, okay, can you send me your publisher's email address so I can send them the review? And I'm like, did you like it? And she's like, yes, oh my gosh, I loved it so much. I had another person who did it for me, this person I knew, and she said to me, I'm so glad I liked it, because sometimes sometimes you say yes to reviews and then you're like, okay. So that was just really an amazing part of the journey for me, because if any of you are authors, you know that being what they call imposter syndrome is very real. And so it's very often that you go through these periods where you're thinking, okay, this is like, there have been times when I've wanted to call the publisher and say, please don't publish it, please don't publish it. And so all of the support is really just something that helps us. I don't know if you've had a similar experience, but it helps me to keep going and to at least think that, okay, maybe there's something in here. So
it helps when people you respect believe in you.
Yes, it really does make a difference. And so that has kind of been the journey. It's just been a lot of support. I said in the dedication, there's this myth, and I'm gonna have to look at it because I don't want to say it wrong, but there's the tree of life. I don't know if you're all familiar with that. It's a Makonde tribe tradition, and the whole idea is, I think I have a lot of my people from St. Kitts here, and one of the things they talk about is each one bring one, or each one pull one up, and that's really what I experienced with this book. That I met people who were willing to give up their time, of their expertise, and of their, Caitlin just reaching out to her agent for me was just because I could go on forever, but if you're an author and you're looking for an agent, one of the things you do is you send out all these letters, you find all the lists, and you see what agents are looking for, and you send them whatever it is they want. They want everything in the body of the email. They want an attachment. They want your firstborn. They want whatever it is they want. You send it to them, and you hear nothing, like Zippo. And I think it's an urban myth that you can get an agent that way. I hardly meet people.
It's not. I got my agent that way.
That way, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've met a lot of people who have, but
I know many who have gotten them that way.
okay, but a lot of times it is by, through networking, and that really helps one author to make it, and to at least get a step up and get somewhere in the direction. So, I really feel that for me, this book, that's like defined the journey, just the support, just like the support I have here today, which is, I just keep looking out and I say, oh yeah, there's that person. But at any rate, that's the short answer or long answer to a very short question.
Well, thank you. That was what we wanted, right? Because we love to hear all about the origins of where the book comes from and the author's imagination and the story of how they bring it to come to be. And usually at a book event, there are aspiring writers in the audience who are trying to find out how to make this happen for themselves, My next question, I was just hoping you could put your book in conversation with other literature of the Caribbean immigrant experience, and just talk about maybe what some of your influences have been and what books you were kind of talking back to, but be they contemporary or more historical. I do think of the journey of Amaya's journey that you presented as being fairly distinct from a lot of what is offered in a lot of ways. For example, she immigrates at a bit of an older age. She immigrates to the Washington D.C. metro region, which is not like where every immigrant fiction book is set. She has her trajectory as a successful executive, which is not necessarily a part of the trope that you would think of as typical. But I did, despite those things that make it very distinct from maybe other things in the tradition, I was hoping you could talk about your foreparents in the tradition of Caribbean literature, and maybe books you look to being in conversation with, the books that you look to as providing the precedent for what you've done, or maybe even books that are out now by people who write now that you think your work is in conversation with.
That's a great question, and a difficult one, because as you said, Amaya's journey is very, very different. I read almost exclusively Caribbean literature. Let's just start there. I mean, I made an exception. I make exceptions, but and there's so much work, and there's so much, and I think that what I love is that there's so much contemporary work now. We're moving away. Not that the stories about colonial times and times of slavery, they're very important. But I do think that it's important also for us to be moving towards also telling stories of contemporary times and of, immigrant stories. And I think I wanted to tell something a little bit different. Also, the fact that she came to DC, Amaya immigrates because her mother-in-law wins a visa diversity lottery, which was probably, I'm not going to say why it was on my mind, but there was a certain person who was talking about it. So she has a lot of the books that I read, when people do immigrate, they maybe immigrate as undocumented, or when they do come, they have a very difficult time. And Amaya and Brian do have a difficult time when they first arrive, but not anything in the realm of what sometimes happens. And they talk about that in the book. They talk very candidly, she and Brian, about the experience that they have and how it differs from some of the other characters in the book who have very different experiences coming up to the US. And one of the things that she says and I think it's something that I think about a lot, because I also had a very positive experience coming up here. I came up at a later age than Amaya. She was 19, 18 when she came up. But I think that there are so many different experiences that people have, and we can talk about some of the others, and also Amaya is very aware that she has had this positive experience and that she has been lucky to have to come up this way and not to have to. But she does say, you know, her son Taiwo, he's autistic. And she's very, very clear that if she was not going to raise him in Trinidad, because where, as she says in the book, they put him in the back of the class and call him a dunce. And so she's basically saying that whatever had happened, she was going to get him out of there no matter what. So I think that it's very different in that respect, in that it's looking at a different side and different aspects and a different immigrant experience, but still showing that despite those differences, it is still, there's still so many similarities, there's still so many difficulties that you face, there's still so many, people make different choices on how to assimilate, how much they want to become, to change, to be a part of the society. So it doesn't quite answer your question, but
Well, the whole purpose of my question is for you to say what you want to say.
this is how I took it.
This is actually my last question, and I don't know how we are doing for time. Can we get a check for time because I'm on my last question? Oh, okay. Well, I'll just proceed, but maybe we can go into a reading if we need more.
Sure, I can read for a little bit and then we can ask some questions. See if the
Sure.
audience has any questions.
Sure. But I'm glad you did start talking about Taiwo and her journey with her son, because this was my final question. I just wanted to ask, how does what Amaya gains as the mother of a neurodivergent son come into play over the course of the book? And what I'm thinking of is just like maybe any strength or things she's learned through parenting an autistic child successfully that maybe become a part of her character or lend themselves in some other way to the way the story moves and to the way that she interacts with other characters, whether that's advocacy for herself and others, or I'm just spitballing here, but or just personal strength, or any of the ways that parenting an autistic son lends Amaya qualities that become useful to her over the course of this book.
Yeah, that's a great question. So just to be clear, I wasn't trying to say anything. Taiwo came to me autistic. I didn't want to have an autistic character, or there wasn't anything like that. It's just, that's just who he is. However, I do think that the level of protectiveness that Amaya feels for him, and that plays into the plot very. It drives the plot in some instances, is really a result of his autism. That maybe if she hadn't had to spend so much time. One of the things that she does with him, for example, he's a big boy. He's a big human. He's a man now, so she has to teach him how to move in the world in a way that people don't see him as initially or immediately assume that he's going to be aggressive. She has worked with him and he turns out to be this really empathetic human being. And so I think in a way it's a success for her. She sees it as it's been a life's work for her. It's been something that has allowed her to even further put behind her the things that she's experienced. I think it also has been an outlet for her in terms of getting something she did not get when she was 18. And one of the things that I think about a lot is the whole way that as Caribbean people, myself, we relate to trauma and we don't deal with it, and we tend to say, oh, we're resilient. It's like it's a superpower, right? We're resilient. We don't need to deal with stuff. We can just move forward and move on. which I mean we all know now is not a good thing. So in a way, it's sort of a balance, a difference in the way she experienced life and she experienced her teens, and then he is experiencing his teens very differently with this really supportive mother and protective mother. So it has allowed her, I think, to be something and to have a full life without thinking about her past, and it's maybe a little cathartic for her as well, but she's not conscious of that, but it is.
Thank you. Well, that's really all I have, but if you wanted to read the section that you have, feel like you do.
Okay, let's see what I'm over.
And we're really in for a treat hearing this in the author's own voice, I feel like. Because I enjoyed it, and I can't wait to hear what it sounds like.
Okay, so I'm gonna read the first chapter of the book. It's only the second time I'm ever reading it. I usually read from a little bit later, but I think that this gives you a good idea, kind of sets things up. It's a little long, so bear with me, but hopefully it'll be okay. So this is in Virginia, and I'll just start. 5 minutes past 5. I was going to be late. Only 15 minutes left to pick up Aunt Marjorie before she had a meltdown. Having finally extricated myself from my last meeting, I waved goodbye to Taylor as I rushed past the main reception desk. She was on the phone, but she smiled and mouthed, "Bye, Mrs. Lin." I hurried down the hallway to the elevators and entered the first one to open. It was empty. Thank you, Jesus, I breathed. I pressed the lobby button once, then pulsed on it 3 or 4 times, even though I knew my impatience would not make the doors close any faster. Finally, they stood together, and the embossed gold sign reading, "Gill, Lin and Associates, Attorneys at Law," was replaced by my reflection in the metallic surface of the doors. My appearance surprised me. I resembled someone in control of their day. My eyes were steady, and I looked respectable in what my husband Brian called my uniform, a striped, long-sleeve, button-down silk shirt, pink and gray that day, tucked into black work trousers. Observing my calm exterior did nothing to dampen the churning in my brain. I ran my hand over my short fro, then dropped it just as quickly when I saw the mess I was making with my hair. I could almost hear the seconds ticking away before the box lurched and began its 10th-floor descent. "Don't stop, don't stop, don't stop," I chanted in my head, tapping my foot to the rhythm of my thoughts, as if doing so would speed up the elevator or prevent it from stopping on any of the floors. It was not an unreasonable request, even at 5 p.m. This building was occupied primarily by law firms and investment firms, all businesses where leaving work before nightfall was unthinkable, unless you were the boss or the boss's wife. When the elevator shuddered to a stop and the doors opened on the main floor, I pulled my briefcase firmly onto my shoulder and glanced at my watch. 8 minutes past 5. As long as traffic was no heavier than usual, I should be able to make up the 5 minutes I'd lost and arrive on time to pick up Aunt Marjorie. Even when she was having a good day, she barely tolerated the Ramos house. The staff told me she watched the clock like a child counting the minutes to recess. At 5:20, she would be sitting near the checkout desk, straight-backed, gripping her handbag in her lap, and radiating impatience in such powerful waves that even the staff, trained to manage the many manifestations of dementia, kept their distance. Sunlight forced me to close my eyes as I stepped outside. After 8 straight hours indoors, it was easy to forget that daylight persisted. No matter how many fluorescent fixtures I had installed in my windowless office, there never seemed to be enough light for me. I inhaled deeply, like a newly released prisoner sampling her freedom, but the breath was dissatisfying. As was typical of a Virginia summer, the combination of heat and humidity thickened the air into a soup-like consistency that barely filled my lungs. People always assumed that because I grew up in the Caribbean, the heat would not impact me. But without the cooling sea breeze, the heat here was oppressive. And even after more than 20 years, I had not gotten used to the Virginia heat. 9 minutes past 5. I headed to the car, my thoughts vacillating between the meeting I had abandoned mid-discussion and my tardiness. Some days it was hard not to resent having to drop everything every day and turn my attention over to Aunt Marjorie's needs. The clip of my heels on the pavement drummed the soft beat of accompaniment to my thoughts. As I passed Brian's car in his reserved spot just outside the building that housed our offices, I regretted parking in the overflow lot. An article in one of the women's magazines we kept in the office recommended parking far from one's destination as a way of incorporating exercise into one's routine. My doctor put the fear of God into me at my physical last month. I was not overweight, she had said, but I needed to exercise. You can't avoid everything that might be coming to you as you age, she had said. But with regular exercise and good eating habits, you can help your body weather the aging process better. I wanted to take the advice seriously. Caring for Aunt Marjorie had given me some insight in the way I did not want to age. I did not want to be so completely dependent on anyone ever. But I had not been able to find time for exercise. Something always tugged at my time. Work, managing the household, caring for Aunt Marjorie, advocating for my son Taiwo, tending the garden, each a heavy stone in a sack I carried around with me perpetually. Whenever I considered putting the burden down, guilt would overcome me. Who would put the effort into caring for everyone like I did? I strode past the footprint of our building, then past two other buildings that occupied the same compound. The overflow lot was deserted, quiet except for the occasional chirp of an unseen bird in the surrounding trees. As I walked past a large golden rain tree, a breeze shivered through its leaves, releasing a blanket of yellow flowers. I stopped, paralyzed by a memory that flowed into my brain in shadows, watercolors, and whispers. The large pui tree that had belonged to Aunt Marjorie's neighbor in Black River, Jamaica, had frequently shed its flowers into her yard. I recall rolling in the leaves as a girl, covering myself in the delicate flowers, feeling their velvety softness against my skin. I heard Aunt Marjorie complain about my soiled school uniform, about my lack of decorum, about the audacity of the neighbor's trees encroaching in her garden. But her voice held no conviction, her scoldings half-hearted, as if her only real annoyance was with herself for not joining me. I relished the imagining for a moment, lingering in my carefree joy, turning the memory around in my mind as if it were a precious jewel, each petal a gem with which I could purchase a segment of my almost forgotten past. Would these flowers have a similar effect on Aunt Marjorie, I wondered? The sight might trigger memories that would transport her disintegrating mind to a place where she felt secure, if only for a few moments. Aunt Marjorie, crap! I swore under my breath. I looked at my watch. 11 minutes past 5. I picked up my pace again. My footfall was quieter now, dampened by the fruit, the flowers, the leaves that littered the ground, and my guilt about being late, which pounded in my head in a familiar rhythm. I spotted my black sedan covered with a dusting of pollen, which effectively nullified the cleaning Taiwo had given it on the weekend. I fished my keys out of my briefcase. Brian had drilled a safety routine into my head when we first brought our car. Initially, I dismissed his earnestness as paranoia, born of growing up with his mother in a relatively remote area in Trinidad. But over time, his lessons sank in and became part of my normal. Always have your keys ready, the key pointing outwards in case you have to use it as a weapon. Check your surroundings before you open the door. If you see someone suspicious, don't get in the car. Keep walking. And so, just before I arrived at the car, I turned. A woman stood behind me. She was about 2 car lengths away. Her head was down, and the sun glinted off of the plastic shine of her handbag as she fumbled in it, looking for keys, which was odd, because my car was the only vehicle in this section of the lot. There was momentum in her stance. Her body tilted forward a few degrees as if she had been moving, and only stopped when I turned. I looked at her a little more closely. Her sweater was baggy, its neck misshapen as if accustomed to sitting on a larger body, and her tight black pants ended just a little too high above her ankles. Like she's expecting a flood, I thought. A vague sense of discomfort fluttered in my stomach, but I dismissed it. She can't be planning to mug me. Who would wear a bright orange sweater in August to mug someone? Plus, I can definitely take her. Although the woman was taller and larger bodied than I was, there was a softness about her that suggested she was not here for a fight. She raised her head and her eyes made 4. She regarded me with a clear, steady gaze. I searched her face, trying to figure out what she could possibly want from me. She was young, with full cheeks that filled out her oval-shaped face, and skin as smooth and unblemished as the shells of the brown eggs I sought out at the grocery. Her hair, braided in a style a few weeks past fresh, was pulled back and would have made her face look bare were it not for the large gold hoop earrings hanging from each ear. My left hand reached up to touch the small gold hoops I had worn for longer than I could remember. I knew those earrings. They were the earrings Caribbean grandmothers passed down to the granddaughters on whom they could pour the love and indulgence they had not dared show their daughters. The woman opened her mouth as if she was going to speak, then closed it. Her bottom lip curved up, and her lips settled into a pursed shape that transformed her face from stranger to familiar as if a switch had been flipped. The desire to flee rose from deep in my belly and pushed against me like lava trapped inside a mountainous dome. I unlocked the car, opened the door, and entered in one fluid motion, locking the door once I was inside. Securely in my car, I looked at her again through the pollen-dusted window. I was sure I'd never seen her before, but my heart pounded in my chest, the sound drumming in my ears as fear filled my body. She approached the car. She formed her mouth into a word. Stop, or maybe please? I did not want to hear her voice. Every ounce of my being rebelled against allowing her any closer. Yet I lowered the window just enough for breath and sound to pass through. I have no cash, I said. My name Angela. I'm your sister, she replied. Her words did not impact me in that moment. It was her accent, smooth, rich, and thickly Jamaican like a buttered slice of hard dough bread that clumped in my throat and threw me spinning backwards into my seat. A wave of black rose in my line of sight. A wave of black that cleared only to reveal a memory of Brian and me standing in shoulder to shoulder silence on the pitch lake in Trinidad, watching the silver shininess of a 25-cent coin sink into the asphalt until it disappeared into a wave of black that left my head too heavy to remain upright. And so, like the coin, I succumbed, leaning back onto the headrest and closing my eyes. But this little piggy had none. The voice was female, linting, playful, pregnant with laughter. I was tiny, lying along the length of an arm, my head in a palm, my body along a forearm, and my legs dangling on either side of an elbow. The sun scattered in blinding streaks between the leaves of a tree, a mango tree, the scent of ripening fruit, sweet, almost overpowering. I struggled to stay in the moment, to stay in the baby's head, because I was in there, but I was also everywhere, looking down on myself through the woman's eyes, looking down from a larger vantage point, aware of everything at once, the trees, the clouds, the sun. But in the baby's space, I felt security, warmth, and love, definitely love. I looked up towards the woman's face, her face shrouded in the shadows, a dark blot in the midst of the sun and the trees. One by one, my toes were being tugged, and now it was my smallest toes' turn. But this little piggy, the voice paused again. This little piggy, another pause. I held my body taut. Anticipation bubbled inside me like a soda in a shaken bottle, pushing against a cap. I had done this before. This little piggy went wee all the way home. With that last phrase, a hand descended on my tummy and tickled me. I shrieked with delight. The woman laughed, throwing her head back. I strained to see her features, to know this person. Light touched her face, revealing first her forehead, then her eyes. Tears ran from her eyes to her cheeks. I did not notice when the tears turned into bright red rivulets flowing down her face until her laughter convolved into an ear-shattering scream.
Amazing. And I needed to hear that in your voice. I definitely needed to hear that in your voice and your lilt and your words. That was just perfect. So thank you.
I just need to learn how to speak in a Jamaican accent. I will be fine and get some lessons.
Well, you do better than me, I'm sure. But I think we're in unless if we want to.
We can open up for questions.
Yeah, we can open it up to questions.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
I wanted to know, and this is very exciting. I wanted to know your book is. It sounds. I'm excited for you. I wanted to know what non-Caribbean writers have influenced you, and maybe even the course of your development as a writer, as an academic. What writers, in particular, maybe African American writers, but not necessarily, have influenced you, or that you love and you've gotten a lot out of over the years?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm a big fan of Louise Erdrich. Maybe controversially, I don't know. I love Zadie Smith's work. I read her work a lot. And now I'm only thinking of Caribbean authors, and you said specifically non-Caribbean.
British, so it's okay.
Yeah,
Actually,
yeah.
she's Jamaican British.
She's
so-
Jamaican British,
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah. But I think, was she born in Jamaica or she was
I
born
don't
in
recall,
the
but
UK?
one of her parents is Jamaican.
Yeah, I
and
think she was born in
her
the
most
UK.
recent novel is partially set in Jamaica.
Okay. Yes, it is. I heard about that. And I mean, Bernardina Viristo, also kind of Caribbean. I'm drawing a blank. Like I read, as I said, I read almost exclusively Caribbean literature. So but there definitely have been many that have influenced me for sure. I mean, I grew up reading primarily American and British authors. So, but in terms of somebody who has kind of stuck with me and been sort of a guide for me, mainly Caribbean.
Any more questions?
I can speak loudly. Thank you for this book and for your previous books. Your children's books I really love. I buy them for my children. I appreciate that this book tracks very closely with my experience. So my question is, I don't find a lot of Caribbean literature in audiobook format. Would that be something that you consider for this book? And the reading was lovely.
Thank you. The book is actually available in audio. Yeah. I met I can't remember her name now, but it's a Jamaican actress. She lives in LA. We met on Zoom. We talked on Zoom before, but the publisher sold the audio rights, and I haven't heard it, but I'm confident she did a great job. She was really nice. She was really very lovely, and I'm confident. And she was very. She asked a lot of great questions about what I wanted and pronunciations and things like that. So I'm quite confident that she's done a great job. So somebody buy it and tell me.
Is that on Audible?
Yes, it is.
It's on Libro.fm as well, and Libro.fm supports small indie bookstores like ours. We're on Libro.fm, so if you'd like to support Sankofa with your audiobook purchase, feel free.
Libro.fm. Okay.
Anyone else have any more questions?
So the way you wrote your book, of course, it's not linear. So when you're writing that, where, like you're seeing, maybe the ending of the book comes first, or do you think through that process in a linear manner, or do different scenes hit you at different times?
That's a great question. So definitely they hit me at different times. And sometimes they hit me in the car. And I have a little notebook, so if you ever see him in an accident, definitely because I was riding in the car. But as you spoke earlier about the format, and the book goes back and forth. There are 3 storylines. There's Amaya, who you met in the reading, she's living it covers like 2 weeks of her life. And then you learn about when she first comes to the US, and that story moves forward, but you learn about her past going backwards. So I actually wrote, I believe if I had to put my head on a block about this, I would say that I probably wrote the sections of her life in Jamaica in a linear manner, but going backwards. But everything else sort of fitted in, as needed, sort of. And if that helps. It's been a while, to be honest. It's been quite a long process. And sometimes it's difficult for me to recall exactly how it came together. But what I spent a lot of time doing was after it was done, like making sure that the timeline worked, that the parts that were moving backwards, we weren't learning things before we should know them, and that a lot of effort went into that section of it. Patty has already read the book, so she was one of my first readers. So.
Anyone else have any questions? All right. Thank you so much, y'all. Give it up.
Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. Thank you, Chantal, for speaking with me.
Y'all love the book so much, we sold out, but it's online. And 20 more copies will be here tomorrow, so I will grab some book slates so that Carol can sign book slates for folks who didn't grab the book tonight. Yeah, so there are a few of these sheets around if you want to get the book online. The books will be here tomorrow, so you can pick it up tomorrow or you can have it sent to your house. It's up to you.
Carol stand autographs in the bookstore.
Absolutely, right?
Most definitely.
All right, y'all. Thank you.
It's lovely to meet you.